Imagine waking up one morning and your brain feels like a room where all the furniture has been removed. You can think, but thoughts don't come from anywhere. You want to eat, but your hand won't reach the spoon. You want to speak, but the words get stuck in your throat. You are completely conscious, feeling every pain, every panic, every ounce of helplessness. But your body and your mind have stopped responding to your commands. This isn't a nightmare. This was the reality of one man in Oregon, 2026. Oregon, 2026. A small town, a normal man, an unimaginable nightmare. Let's call him John, an engineer by profession, a man of logic and precision. He had never been seriously ill in his entire life. His routine was predictable. His life was quiet. His future was certain. He had absolutely no idea that his own body was about to betray him in a way that would baffle modern medicine and turn his family's world upside down. He could have been your neighbor, your colleague, or even you, until everything fell apart. But it didn't start with a bang. It started with something so small, so ordinary, that no one paid attention. John felt unusually tired one afternoon, as if his bones were made of lead. He brushed it off as work stress and lack of sleep. A few days later, the fatigue got worse. His wife noticed his hands trembling while holding his morning coffee. John joked that he needed to recalibrate his fingers, engineering style. It was funny, until it wasn't. And when it stopped being funny, the real fear began. Within weeks, the situation turned serious. John started forgetting things. Where he put his keys. What he was saying mid-sentence. Simple words that used to come effortlessly now felt like they were buried somewhere deep inside a locked vault. Then came the most terrifying symptom: eating. Every time he put food in his mouth, his throat refused to swallow. The act of swallowing, something so instinctive, so automatic, had become an art he had completely forgotten. His weight dropped rapidly. His family's concern turned into panic. This was not just fatigue anymore. This was something else, something dark, something that was stealing him piece by piece. When John's legs started giving out and his walk became unsteady, the family rushed him to the hospital. At the hospital, doctors ran blood tests. Everything came back normal. They did an MRI of his brain. The doctors stared at the screen, studying the images carefully. No tumors, no bleeding, no stroke. The images were crystal clear, but the patient was anything but. A neurologist checked his reflexes, shone a light into his eyes, made him follow her finger. Everything seemed perfectly fine, except for the man lying on the bed, who couldn't think clearly, couldn't eat properly, and could barely move his arms. Then came the words every family dreads the most. The doctor looked at John's wife and said, "We don't know what this is." 4 words. So simple, so small, but perhaps the most terrifying 4 words any human being can ever hear. It was the admission that modern medicine was failing. Over the next few days, John's condition continued to deteriorate. He could still answer questions, but his replies were slow and fragmented, as if someone was trying to piece together a jigsaw puzzle inside his head, but kept dropping the pieces. He was slowly becoming a stranger his family no longer recognized. The neurology team suspected a rare autoimmune disorder. They started him on steroids, a powerful anti-inflammatory drug meant to calm down an overactive immune system. For a short while, it seemed to work. His thinking cleared up a little, his movements improved slightly. But the relief was short-lived, and soon his symptoms returned, this time with even greater intensity. It was as if the medication had only made the disease angrier, more determined, more aggressive. And that's when the case became even more confusing. John could no longer eat, could barely think, and now he was forgetting how to walk. A feeding tube was inserted to keep him alive. Machines filled his room, beeping and humming, keeping his body functioning while his mind slowly slipped away. But the real question was, Who was going to bring him back? Doctors ran more tests. They performed a lumbar puncture, draining fluid from his spine, a painful and complicated procedure. The results came back normal. They gave him multiple antibiotics. Nothing worked. Every test was a dead end. Every treatment was a failure. Every passing day drained a little more hope from his family's hearts. At one point, the family faced the most horrifying question. Was this disease destroying his body from the inside without any identifiable cause? The doctors seriously considered a prion disease, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, a rare and fatal condition where toxic proteins accumulate in the brain, turning it into a sponge-like structure. It is 100% fatal. There is no cure, no treatment, no hope. This was the point of no return. John's family was left with just one question. Was he slowly dying? And were they destined to watch it happen? Were they going to lose their father, their husband, their brother, piece by painful piece? But John's story does not end here, because when modern medicine had failed, a simple human memory became the turning point. His brother remembered something. A detail from decades ago, when they were children in rural Oregon, John had been bitten by a very rare type of tick, one that is mostly found along the western coast. At the time, it was nothing, just a small bump, a tiny red mark. Then it healed. No fever, no rash, just a tick bite, forgotten and buried under years of memories. But what if that tick had left something behind? What if it had deposited a microscopic pathogen into his bloodstream that had stayed dormant for decades, hiding, waiting, and then suddenly awakened? It was a long shot, a wild guess, but it was a clue. Doctors started him on a combination of specialized antibiotics and antiparasitic drugs designed to target rare neurological infections. They weren't sure, they weren't confident, but with no other options left, it was worth a try. It was the last bullet fired into a dark room, and it was the bullet that lit up the entire room. And then, something almost miraculous happened. The first few days brought no change, just the same silent nights, the same beeping machines, the same anxious faces. But then, on a quiet morning, a nurse noticed something. John moved his finger. It was just a tiny movement, barely an inch, but it was worth $1 million. The next day, he held a glass of water by himself. His hands were trembling, but the glass was in his grip, under his command. A week later, he smiled peacefully and completed a full sentence. I am hungry. 3 words. But those 3 words carried the weight of his entire battle, his return, his victory. What had actually happened? It was discovered that an extremely rare bacterial or parasitic infection, likely transmitted by that tick bite decades earlier, had caused inflammation in certain parts of his brain, slowly robbing them of their function over time. It wasn't an autoimmune disease. It wasn't a prion. It was a hidden infection, a silent invader that had stayed dormant for years and then revealed itself in the most confusing way possible. With the right combination of drugs, his body was finally able to fight back. He slowly relearned how to walk, how to eat, and how to think. It wasn't just a recovery, it was a resurrection that left the entire medical community in awe. He walked out of that hospital on his own 2 feet, the same man who had been brought in to die. John's case is a haunting reminder of the complexities and limitations of modern medicine. It tells us that when drugs and machines fail, sometimes the biggest clue lies hidden in a family's memory or in the forgotten history of an old illness. But most importantly, it reminds us of the incredible human capacity to find hope and recovery, even in the darkest moments. And just imagine, if that tick had never bitten him, or if his brother had never remembered that detail, John's story might have been completely different. Perhaps the greatest mystery lies within us, buried in our own past, waiting to be uncovered. He was the Oregon man who couldn't think, couldn't eat, and couldn't recover. But in the end, he did all 3. And maybe, just maybe, that is the real medicine: never giving up.